Hello and welcome to this 12th session of CharIN Tuesday. My name is Sebastian Crusius, live from Berlin, and I welcome you, all of you, to this session about the user experience in charging infrastructure. So before we start with our panelists today, I would like to give you a brief overview about me and my role. So as mentioned, I'm Sebastian Crusius. Next slide, please. I'm Future Mobility Advisor with the Cosmic Cat Group, and Cosmic Cat Group, as you see on the next slide, is a strategy boutique and venture builder for new mobility. Cosmic Cat was founded in 2019 by the former CEO of Hubcheck, Thomas Deiber, and together with Thomas and some other e-mobility experts, we developed this company for especially strategy rollout and venture building in the mobility ecosystem. On the last slide, you see some of our faces. The person behind Cosmic Cat, as mentioned, Thomas Deiber, Martin Petschnik, and Paul Gomeni are some of them. And what we did over the last years is to help especially automotive companies and utilities in the growth stories of electric mobility. One of our last projects was helping the user journey for the German government and the German Ministry of Transport, which led the National Coordination Unit of Charging Infrastructure and helped them to build a, let's say, more like unique user journey for public charging. This is the outcome is laterly explained by Sebastian Lahmann, who's one of our panelists today, and that's basically one of our touch points to the session today. So now, before we start in the session, I would like to introduce Michael Keller. He's from Volkswagen and of course CharIN. Most of you know him personally. So Michael, please give us a small introduction about the topic today and the plug and charge ecosystem belonging to the user journey of public charging.
Hello, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Sebastian, for being here, the moderator. Yeah, we are looking here into the third session of the global CharIN Tuesday season, let's say, and it's the 12th CharIN Tuesday this year. And yeah, if you look on the calendar, it's the last one. So that we are going soon to Christmas, but before that we want to show and explain and discuss about the user journey and what are the key elements and where we see perspective of how to bring the user in a situation that it's seamless, easy, and always working when he wants to charge his car. So just a short introduction. So next slide, please. So this is here the global perspective of all different topics, what the CharIN is supporting regards the CCS and the function of charging. And today we are focusing on the comfort features. For example, plug and charge is one of the big impacts which will bring the customer journey forward in our vision. But also that we have comprehensive infrastructure regarding power, and all this works best if all cars, infrastructure components, chargers are very interoperable and absolutely good in the usability. So next slide, please. So to give you a short introduction, so we have also here the overview of what is going on in the world, and the CCS charging points means also the fast charging points is more than 30,000, and you can see here the different numbers of the different areas and of the different performances. And what we also saw in the recent time is that the number of HPC chargers is not only absolute, but also relative increasing. So we see a very strong trend regards higher power, which is also very important to get the customer satisfaction regarding short charging times. So we see some numbers in the view or in the vision of 400 kilometers charging in 10 minutes, for example. So this is where the industry is going, and where also we see first products in the market. I can refer to the Porsche Taycan as one of the good examples, and that's also very important for the acceptance and for the user journey. So next slide, please. So you can see what we have done also in CharIN with our partners. So this is something new, which you can see on our CharIN website. There we have designed a dashboard which indicates all kinds of different AC and DC charger, which are interoperable under the CCS standard. And this is also something where we are delivering as CharIN services to our customers, users, and also for all the partners inside of CharIN. Next slide, please. Yeah, customer comfort is not only plug and charge, what I already mentioned, it's also further functionalities like automated wireless charging, which summer was very hyped, and in the meantime it's getting a bit quiet, but it's nevertheless technology where is a quite interesting solution, especially also for autonomous vehicles or different types of fleet usage. And what is relatively new and which is also being discussed very intense in the CharIN community is the automated conductive charging. There is still no official standard, but that's activity where the CharIN community and the focus group is working very intense on that technology to make it also, like in the other solutions, in an interoperable and very successful way with ideal one standard which is globally being used for this new technology, which also gives additional customer comfort. So next slide, please. Because plug and charge, we are getting very deeper into, and this is now available on the market, where we also will have a look into it more deeply. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's from my side, the introduction for today, and I'm looking forward to hear the speeches and the discussions about customer comfort, which is in regard of the best user journey we can offer under a global standard. So welcome, and let's start.
All right, Michael, thanks a lot for the introduction and the, let's say, topic plug and charge and user journey, customer journey. This brings us to our panelists for today. So the panelists, all of them are quite familiar with the topic user journey and customer journey. And first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Susanne Koblitz. She is from Ionity and is there leading the technical department. And Susanne, in her history, she worked for companies like BMW, and of course, she was a research fellow at CERN in Switzerland. So yeah, we are really happy to have you as a technical expert today here on board. After after Susanne, I would like to introduce you to Sebastian Lahmann. Sebastian Lahmann, I know him since his beginning in the electric mobility ecosystem. He started 2017 for the NOW GmbH, so an institutional company founded by the German Ministry of Transport. And now he is leading a team in the coordination unit for charging infrastructure in Germany, and especially the realization of charging infrastructure from the governmental perspective. And besides Susanne and Sebastian, we have Jens Schmutzler today. He was former research fellow from the TU Dortmund, so a university in Germany. And Jens is CEO and co-founder of the company called Verisco. Verisco is a typical spin-off of a university, so from TU Dortmund, and he's now going into the direction of testing, which belongs to plug and charge technology and 15.11.8 standard. So I think we have quite a lot of competency today in the room in the online panel, but besides the panelists, we got you here. So right now we have more than 58 participants in the line. So welcome all of you from all over the world. Really appreciate you today here in the session. And I would like to give you a small hint regarding our technology. So we have a chat functionality, and in the chat functionality, you're pleased to just write in your questions we can use, especially for the Q&A session after the presentations, but even within the presentations. So please use the chat functionality. And now we would like to start with the presentation of Sebastian Lahmann from the governmental perspective of charging infrastructure. And I think he will tell us a little bit more about his perspectives and the governmental perspectives, even on plug and charge and 15.11.8. So thanks, Sebastian, for joining us, and looking forward to your session.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Sebastian Lahmann, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak today to you. Yeah, next slide, please. Within the Leitstelle, as Sebastian mentioned, I'm Program Manager Charging Infrastructure Technology. So I'm dealing, generally speaking, with all technical questions around infrastructure. And what I've brought to you today is a brief look into the Leitstelle, and also, and this is the core point, we have a look into the user journey. Our position paper, I will give you an overview also about the methodology, and so also the user journey itself. So next slide, please. What is the Leitstelle? One push more, please. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, what is the Leitstelle? The Leitstelle is called Nationale Leitstelle Ladeinfrastruktur. We use normally the abbreviation Leitstelle. So it is the National Center for Charging Infrastructure under the roof of the NOW. NOW is 100% owned company by the German federal government. And it's an abbreviation for National Organization for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology. This name goes back to the very first program in 2006, which was called Innovation Program Hydrogen and Fuel Cells, and that gave the company's name. And over the years, e-mobility with batteries became more and more present, and also present in our company. So yeah, next slide, please. Almost 1 year ago, the National Center for Charging Infrastructure was founded by the Ministry of Transport, and our task is to coordinate and to manage activities to expand the charging infrastructure in Germany. And 2 months ago, there was the grand opening. The image shows in the middle Minister Scheuer. He's the federal minister of the Ministry of Transport. And as you can see in the background, like the building itself, also the Leitstelle is still under construction, and we are growing and hiring more staff to deal with our major goals, which are that is the most present call for tenders program for 1,000 locations for HPC hubs, each with several charging points for long distance mobility. Then we have to organize a build-up of another 50,000 public accessible charging points. We have to develop several funding programs for charging infrastructure, and last but not least, a user-friendly charging infrastructure, which is transparently easy to find, easy to use, and convenient. And that leads us to the next slide. Which is the cover of our user journey. And in the following, I would like to give you an idea what we have done with this user journey. So the next slide is overview and methodology. When we look at charging electric vehicles, it's especially in the public, quite different and a quite new experience, and it differs much, in many cases from the learned classic refueling process. And with this paper, we describe consequently a user-centered charging process from the very beginning to the end. And this paper is based on different works which were done before, like of the National Platform for Mobility. The working group number 5 made also a paper or some work dealing with the user journey. And the key points there was that charging has to be simple, always possible, transparent, and safe. And we added in parts ambitious goals to the claim, or to claim charging to be easy, and that means also to be convenient. Another approach is that we made no definitions, but we chose a statement-based approach that describes the current situation and also expectations for the year 2025. And as I say, this paper was developed in a project house at the Leitstelle together with experts from car manufacturers and also from CPOs. And we started in the beginning of 2020. And due to the pandemic, the entire process, except of the kickoff meeting, was digitally realized. The statement-based approach to help us the statement-based approach helps us to focus consequently on the user's perspective and guaranteed that we leave certain own opinions and beliefs aside. So this paper addresses in the end everybody who is interested in or should be interested in charging battery electric vehicles, so from federal and local authorities to CPOs and EMPs and so on. So let's have a look into the paper and the sections. As I mentioned, we have a focus on the entire charging process. So it starts with the idea, oh, I need to charge, and to the idea, it would be nice if I can book a charging point, over navigating and finding a charging point on site, getting charging started, getting the charging process paid, and also the need for support in certain cases. So next slide, please. As I mentioned, that we worked with statements, but not with definitions. So a statement for finding a charging point could be, as an electric vehicle user, I would like to be able to view all accessible charging points, including their location data and current occupancy states, on different media. So that could be a smartphone or tablet, and in order to find the best charging point for me. So could you please push once again or 2 times? Sorry, one slide back, please. Yeah, thank you. But we all know that this picture differs from the reality, and this has to be improved. And so the statement, or one statement for 2025 could be, as an electric vehicle user in 2025, I would like to receive personalized suggestions and advice on the nearest locations for charging. So to sum up, there are two main problems at the moment. So there's mostly no holistic overview about all accessible charging points, and there's no complete availability of information and data through the charging points. And from the idea of feeling safe regarding the next available charging point, it's not too far away to think about to book a charging point in advance. So next slide, please. At the moment, booking is not very common at all, and booking in this case means to make a reservation for short time via navigation system or app. Could you please push once again? Thank you. And one statement could be in 2025, as an electric vehicle user in 2025, I would like to book a charging point in advance or to have it booked automatically by means of route planning. And when you think about it, a series of questions arise, like starting with a special demand for hardware, and it affects also data and availability of data, and also the implementation of the booking process is quite unclear. And this is exemplary. This is an exemplary question to handle and discuss, for example, in another project house at the Leitstelle. All right, after having booked a charging point, we need to get there, and this is shown in the next slide. So this is an overview. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is an overview of the following steps. So how to navigate there, how to find the charging point on site to start, and the charging process at all. And I would recommend to have a look into the paper by yourself. You can download it on your website. Unfortunately, at the moment, only in German, but I hope that by latest the evening today, there will be also an English version available for you for downloading. So next slide, please, the payment process. Currently, we see a limited convenience for direct payment, and there are numerous possibilities for ad hoc charging. So credit card, debit card, and also text message payment, or Stromticket, which is like unique in Germany. So this process has to be improved, and could you push once more, please? And the second one. Yeah, thank you. And the statement for 2025 should be that the transparency of payment process has to increase, and the maximum of comfort should be provided. And fortunately, the current amendment of the Ladesäulenverordnung has this in perspective, and will change, hopefully, some things regarding the payment process. To speed up, I would like to come to the next slide. So this is the final sections in the user journey. So contacting support and service. These are sometimes support is needed and need to be handled. And section 9 is the charging experience. So there are all aspects condensed in this section, which make charging more convenient and more reliable. And to sum up all the presentation and all the section points, I provided a short video for you. Unfortunately, it's also in German, but I think that the pictures are speaking for themselves. So yeah, please enjoy the video, and thank you for your attention. And now you can show the video. Thank you.
All right, so simply charging, this is how our task, this is what we do. Sebastian Lahmann mentioned there will be a download of the thesis paper, the user journey, in English within the next weeks. So please definitely use the website national-leitstelle.de to download that. Thanks, Sebastian, for telling us a little bit more about the background information of the process. Me personally, I have to admit that I'm a big fan of open ecosystems. I worked almost 5 years in the management of Hubject, and that time we tried to figure out this holistic view on a user journey, a joint user journey in the market. So really appreciate that years after that, your institution came up with this process on the one hand, so working with car manufacturers, politics and utilities on the other side, as well as publish the thesis papers as a good method to work with. So I think it's really good to have this paper. And now I would like to start the question in your direction, because right now we have 70 participants in the line. And after we understood how the German government looked at the user journey in general, I would now like to ask you, because we have an opportunity, a poll in this go-to meeting. And the question we would like to raise up now is, how would you rate the overall user journey across all CPOs? And what's your opinion on that? So how would you like to rate the overall user journey for public charging in Europe across all charging stations operators? Please use 1 is excellent, 5 is very bad. Please use the poll now, and we have a like thermometer regarding the question. Okay, that's interesting. So 40% voted with 4. So 4 is not 5. This is good. But in the end, this poll shows us a little bit how the European participants voted the user journey, the current user journey, which is definitely a great starting point for our next panelist. So Susanne will tell us a little bit more about the question how to demonstrate how you can improve the user journey. And I think plug and charge is definitely one answer on that, but you have many other answers how Ionity will improve this user journey. So a lot to do. But now we are really interested in your story in the demonstration of plug and charge from Ionity perspective. So Susanne, thanks for having you here.
Sebastian, thank you for having me. I'm Susanne Koblitz from Ionity, and I'll tell you a bit about the Plug and Charge project, which is, and I'll come to that, not an exclusive Ionity project, but rather a very successful industry project. And I'm very glad that I get the opportunity to present this here today. If you go to the next slide. So I don't think I have to say a lot about Ionity. I hope this company joint venture of a couple of car manufacturers that decided that, yes, we need a high power charging network in Europe is already known to most of the participants. This slide gives a short introduction of what we are aiming for. And so high power charging is our focus. We are installing sites with 4 to 6 charge points all over Europe. And I think whenever I give this presentation and talk about Ionity and I get the glimpse on the map plus the nice pictures of the sites that are already installed, I think we can see that Ionity has had a very impressive journey. And I'm personally very glad that I could participate in that. So today, we have 316 high power charging charge parks that are open to the public for charging. And as you can see, we have a very European focus. So we are building a European high power charging network. Now we can move to the next slide. Besides building our high power charging network, of course, we also have a focus on the customers. I'm head of charging technology at Ionity, which means I'm the tech person, so responsible to make charging stations work. And normally you would expect this work to be very focused on power electronics and many other things. But one of the great things about the work at Ionity was that from the very beginning, we have been focusing on the customer and the customer experience. And one of the results is actually the Ionity design, which I hope that you've already had the opportunity to actually encounter in the wild on one of our charge points with the halo, which is the light on top that is an additional communication and orientation tool for the customer, so they can directly see which charge points are available and how things work. So we have spent quite some time thinking about how to improve the customer experience, and I hope that you can also feel that some of this already work and in action. And of course, plug and charge, the key topic today, is also a key feature when it comes to customer usability, improving the customer journey, because obviously plug and charge is the charging setup where the customer has the least to do on the charge point, because he simply plugs in and then the charging works, everything else is automatic. Having said that, let's have a closer look on plug and charge and what all of this means. So if we can go to the next slide. Here we go. Plug and charge sounds very intuitive and very simple. You plug in, the charging station recognizes the car. From recognizing the car, then automatically authentication and everything else is handled, and the customer can just walk away and the vehicle is being charged. However, things get more complicated if you take into account that, of course, we all want to have freedom of choice. We want to choose our proper electromobility contract depending on our needs. We also want to maybe even choose the charge points that we go to. And because of this freedom of choice, we have quite a lot of different mobility service providers in Europe, and we also have quite a lot of different backend providers and charge point operators such as Ionity, everyone having a slightly different regional orientation, also maybe different use cases. Some are more in the cities, some are more like Ionity with high power charging networks. And all of this is very good. It shows also the expanding market and all the developments that we have in Europe. But it makes something like plug and charge very complicated, because you don't have only one player that simply has to recognize, it's that car, maybe from a vehicle number, serial number or something like that, and everything is handled. No, you have several players that are in the room, and in order to make plug and charge really work reliably, all these players have to interact together in a way that they can actually trust each other. And it's not that in business environment you don't trust each other, but if you let IT systems take care of these kind of things, the trust has actually to reach a technical level. And you might now say that with the RFID token, all of this was more or less the same, or is mostly the same, and the complexity wasn't needed there. But then we can also say that we are aware, at least since the presentation in the Chaos Computer Club, that with the RFID payment, some improvements are needed. And the rollout and the work on plug and charge has actually focused very much on these improvements. So instead of just having the interaction between the car and the charging station, for plug and charge, we have the interaction between car and charging station, the CPO backend, the roaming platform, and the MSPs. All of them participate, and if you count, you can see that there are at least 4 communication interfaces that are implemented, or all in all, even 5 partners that are playing into one simple authentication process. Obviously, to make that work, you need to bring everything on a different IT security level, which implicitly says you need an industry-wide PKI system for these roaming processes, because in the end, there's also a payment that is involved there. So plug and charge, while sounding very simple, in the rollout and in the implementation, it was quite complex and complicated, and it was not the work of an individual player, but rather a project that took quite a long time to get developed. And I'm quite glad that I get the opportunity to present this to you today. So if you go to the next slide, I'll give you some more details on how this project actually came to the implementation. And I think Plug and Charge started before I joined electromobility, which was in 2015. And because it started in the work on the ISO 15118-2 edition 1, which was published in 2014. So from that moment, a first part of the standard on Plug and Charge had been published. But that standard works on mainly the communication between the charging station and the electric vehicle. The rest of the ecosystem still needed to be figured out. And there was quite a lot of work on this done by different companies. But from what I sort of got to participate in, I can start with the testing activities that were started with Ionity and quite a lot of partners in the second half of 2018. That was also the point when the Object Implementation Guide was published. And as you can see, there is a third document providing requirements that was only published end of last year, the Plug and Charge Anwendungsregel, which then provides another set of requirements that is needed to get the entire system working in the industry. So we started end of 2018. Ionity, a young company, but we had quite a lot of partners on board. And being the CPO, we were also very focused on making Plug and Charge work. We started with the tests between the electric vehicle and the charging station to figure out and to make sure that the ISO 15118 communication would work. In spring 2019, we had then reached a point that we could gradually add more and more players to our tests. So after the test between vehicle and charging station, we had then added the CPO backend in the communication to it. Over the summer, then we could extend to the roaming platform. Until end of 2019, we had the first successful Plug and Charge charging sessions taking place over the entire chain, from the vehicle over the charging station, the backend, the roaming platform, to an MSP and back, including all that is involved. I'm sure that you've heard that with Plug and Charge, everything is related to certificates. That is essentially the IT token, the secure IT token used to put the security in the communication. So by end of 2019, with the testing with all our partners, we could validate the entire certificate chain and make it work. But obviously, this was still done in lab and test environments. So the year of 2020 has been, again, a year with a lot of testing on Plug and Charge. In January, we had our first charging station activated close to the Stuttgart area. I guess everybody knows or can guess why. To allow OEMs and other partners to do Plug and Charge testing on a live site. Gradually, since then, we have been adding more and more charging stations, also to test the operational processes, because certificate handling, certificates only have a limited lifetime, so you need to refresh them, you need to keep the systems operational. And that was another focus of the tests that we have done in 2020. So up until very recently, that now we can say in our network, together with our partners, Plug and Charge is operational and accessible for all customers. And with that, we can move to the next slide, which is the introduction of the presentation on Plug and Charge, which is the video. Thank you. If you
All
move
right.
to the next slide, that's then also the conclusion for today from me. So I hope I could give you a little impression on what Plug and Charge was about, and also show you that it's successfully working now. And I'm looking forward to see many Plug and Charge charging sessions in our network. Thank you very much.
All right. Susanne, thanks a lot for the presentation, especially the insights in your testing and implementation efforts. That was definitely great to see, have a little bit look of behind the scenes. And now with the conclusion of seeing how important Taycan is charged with 1511.8 Plug and Charge is definitely a good impulse for the movement, for the upcoming movement. So we will come back later on in the panel discussion a little bit more about some questions for the rollout. But before we do that, I would like to introduce our last panelist for today. So Jens Schmutzler, he, as mentioned, is from Verisco, and he is one of the guys who ensures that the testing and the technology, really more the nitty-gritty stuff, is working. So Jens, please give us a little bit more insight about your activities with Verisco out of the scientific ecosystem you are coming from.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sebastian, for your introduction. And I'm pretty glad to be here today and to introduce to you some insights into the technology and the complexity of testing plug and charge features. So yeah, if you could go to the next slide. Let's have a brief look at the relevance and also the challenges for testing PNC features. So I think all of us agree and already know that the key convenience feature that Plug and Charge at the end provides is the seamless authentication of the charging process, so that at the end user does not need to perform any manual interaction to authenticate the charging process anymore. And with this seamless integration, actually, the expectation of the end user is also rising that everything is working, just working. And for that reason, of course, proper testing and quality assurance is becoming really a fundamental key factor for successful market adoption of Plug and Charge. And as I think we already saw a little bit from the presentation from Susanne, the key challenges here are that with PNC, there's coming a rather complex infrastructure into the game with a rather complex end-to-end system and with many stakeholders being involved. And this actually makes the testing also a lot more complex, because you are not only testing between an EV and an EVSE, but you have the complete chain in the backend processes also in the context of the tests. And that is, of course, one of the major challenges for PNC testing. With this comes, of course, the orchestration between those stakeholders. So you need to basically negotiate between everyone who is responsible for what, and also on a technical means, if you want to isolate faults, you need to really understand where the root cause of any issue is. And this, again, becomes more complex with many stakeholders involved. And with PNC, due to the security mechanism it provides, all data communication is encrypted. And this, of course, at the end also means that debugging is becoming more complex and more tedious for the developers. And that is, I think, something we will see on the next slides, where we look into basically the status quo of Plug and Charge testing today. So in this slide, I want to provide a little bit of an overview. How is Plug and Charge in the context of the CharIN CCS step model? I think the step model is known to most of you. So CharIN has basically 3 steps of CCS roadmap. CCS Basic, which is basically already rolled out in the market, providing authentication in most cases via an RFID card, so with manual user interaction required for AC or DC charging. And then in the next step with CCS Extended, Plug and Charge is coming into the play, providing secure communication via transport layer security and Plug and Charge functionality, so basically automated authentication mechanisms through PKI infrastructure. Plug and Charge is then, of course, also still on board, basically with CCS Advanced, where we then see further more advanced use cases being included with bidirectional power transfer, automatic connection devices, and wireless power transfer. If you now map this to the communication technology, you basically see CCS Basic is implemented based on a DIN 7121, not providing any authentication mechanism over the charging communication interface between the EV and EVSE. This all then comes with ISO 15008 with a kind of a generation 1 of Plug and Charge as part of the ISO 15008-2 published in 2014. And currently the technical committee is working on a kind of a second generation of Plug and Charge for the ISO 15008-20. And if you now look at the testing specifications that are available on these technical specifications, then you will see that at the moment, the ISO 15008-4 is the only technical test specification we have at hand to start tests between an EV and EVSE on conformance for Plug and Charge features. For CCS Advanced, for the -20, the work has not yet even started. So there, I think we will still have to wait quite some time to see some concrete test specification. But we will now see on the next slides that -4 document of ISO 15008 is already a rather mature starting point to start PNC testing. Okay, so please next slide. Yeah, so this is the reference test architecture published in the ISO 15008 conformance testing document series. So the principal paradigm of ISO 15008 testing is that we are testing in a black box test paradigm. So basically the connection between a test system and the system under test, so basically an EV or EVSE, is always only conducted over the CCS interface. So there's no further interface established between the test system and the system under test. And then there is a set of test cases available in the ISO 15008-4 test specification, which is basically compiling the complete test suite that is then being executed against a system under test. And then inside the test system, there's a lot of kind of infrastructural functions available, like codecs for encoding and decoding information, like system adapters in order to connect according to the standard to the system under test. And we will now in the next slide to look a little bit more on the specific Plug and Charge functions that are here relevant here. So first of all, there are in this test specification already 7 test PKIs and configurations defined, where we'll have another slide further down the road and look into further details there. Then we have a specific security codec, which is responsible for encoding and decoding TTCN3 based data representations of X507 certificates into corresponding data streams that can be then understood by the system under test. So that is a really important functionality and refers to the certificate token Susanne was previously mentioned already, has mentioned before also already. Then we have XML security functions that need to be implemented in the test system also to calculate message digest, to validate the signing, verify the data streams that are signed with the corresponding signature algorithms, and also to verify the certificate chains up to the root certificate authority. And last but not least, we also have the system adapter, which needs to implement a transport layer security in order to establish a secure connection between the test system and the system under test. And as part of this adapter, all the configuration parameters are provided for the TLS SEDEC, so that it is in line with the corresponding conformance tests and the technical specifications. So things like TLS protocol version, the cipher suite that is being used underneath, and also the TLS certificate configurations are provided here. Okay, so next slide, I think, is on the PKI infrastructures. Yes, so there's a general or generic schematic in the ISO 15008 test specification, which is derived from the PKI infrastructure defined in ISO 15008, tailored towards testing. And as you can see at the bottom, at the end, there are various certificates derived from certain root CAs or root CAs that implement either the valid certificate token, but can also implement invalid cases, ones that are already expired, ones that will expire soon. And these are provided all in order to provide a complete set of scenarios that could happen in the field, and to basically provide complete test coverage of all scenarios that could be encountered in the field to get the plug-and-charge implementation reliable and robust. Based on this schematic, overall there are 7 different PKIs derived, which are shown on the next slide. So there's various scenarios with a single root CA or multiple root CA. That is the one on the top left, which is, I think, used in most cases today. But there are also invalid PKI infrastructures provided with more than 2 sub-CAs in the chain, and also with expired sub-CA certificates. So the ISO 15008 test specification already provides a rather broad scope of theoretical scenarios where things could go wrong, and provides basically a broad baseline for the testing specifications of plug and charge. Also for private environments, shown on the right-hand side, corresponding PKIs are defined. So if we are not talking about public plug and charge use cases, but private ones, then these are also considered here already. Okay, next slide, please. With respect to the numbers of test cases, so that you get a rough idea of what we are talking about with respect to the numbers of test cases defined in the ISO 15008 conformance test specifications. So shown here on the top for system under test electric vehicle, both on for DC and AC charging, you see that altogether about 1/4 of the test cases available in the specifications are basically specific to plug and charge use case scenario. The rest is either common for plug and charge or so-called external identification means, which is basically the RFID card-based type of authentication. And for the EVSE, it's actually rather similar. We also there have about 1/4 of test cases related to PNC specific ones. Altogether, for EVs, we have roughly 400 test cases at hand for DC charging, and for EVSE, we are in the area of 300 test cases. Okay, next slide, please. I think it shows already quite the complexity of the tests that need to be conducted. This slide should then show at the end how a corresponding test of a system under test for EVSE or EV would look like. In case of the EVSE, we have the special situation that the test system basically emulates an electric vehicle. And if we test an EVSE in the context of PNC, we are not actually only testing the plug and charge functions of the EVSE, but we are also implicitly testing some plug and charge related functions from the backend. However, these tests that are defined in ISO 15008 only refer to the interface to the EVSE. They are not referring to the backend protocol. They are looking into the functions basically. So if, for example, a signature was derived correctly in the backend, but it does not look into the communication between the backend systems and verify these. It's only looking over the CCS interface into the EVSE and double checks basically if the signatures were derived correctly. For the plug and charge PKI configuration. In this case, it is possible basically to use either the test PKIs that are defined in the ISO 158-4 document, but these could also be replaced by third-party PKIs in order to get start a first step into a complete end-to-end test without an EV being present, but with a complete chain EVSE with a complete backend integrated to do some tests, not only the component test, but the start of the complete end-to-end test. For EV tests, on the other side, it is then the inverse case, basically. The test system in this case is testing the EV plug and charge functions. In case of the EV, those are all terminated on the EV side. So in this case, the test system basically covers the scope of the EVSE and those plug and charge backend functions that could also be provided by a third party, depends on the integration concept of the test system here. And again, the PKI configurations could be used either from the ISO 158-4 document, or in case of an existing third-party integration, also based on such a third-party PKI. Okay, so I think that's it for the overview. My key takeaways here are basically, if you go to the next slide. So for CCS Advanced, we will definitely see with those use cases like auto connect charging devices as well as wireless power transfer, that those will drive the demand for plug and charge even further due to the fact that these use cases that by themselves are pushing kind of seamless processes. And this will, of course, also strengthen PNC in the market. With respect to testing specifications, we can already start testing of plug and charge today based on what is being provided in the ISO 158-4 standard, which is already published for quite some time. It is providing a rather broad scope or a rather broad approach in testing PNC, which is not tailored to a specific market adoption, basically, or a specific market implementation. And therefore, I think in the last step, it is now the correct time for CharIN, and maybe also in 2021, to revisit the PNC requirements as part of the focus groups, charging communication and charging interoperability, to define a corresponding implementation and testing guideline, similar to what we have done already for CCS Basic in this year, to get plug and charge reliable on the road. Okay, that's, I think, from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and glad to discuss with you any questions.
Great. Jens, thanks so much, especially the takeaways. I liked it pretty much. And yeah, you mentioned questions. So I would like to request other questions for our Q&A session. So please use our chat functionality and write down your questions in the chat window. But before we start the Q&A session, we have two last poll questions. And one is so also based a little bit on my personal history. So I had my first meeting about plug and charge in 15.11.8 with a Munich-based automotive company 2012, so in autumn 2012. And that time we discussed about the possibilities for a root PKI infrastructure with Subject. So really, really long time ago. And especially the slides of Susanne and Jens showed that there is a long way to go. There was a long way to go for the implementation. So our question is more regarding the future. How long is the implementation of plug and charge likely to take in your companies? So if you say less than 6 months, it's a no-brainer. You are that far ahead already. Then type this. Other could say it's less than 12 months, so maybe the next year. Others would mind 1 to 2 years, or maybe you expect more than 2 years regarding other priorities and other topics. So yeah, looking forward to your answers regarding the likeliness to the implementation in your company. Okay, that seems in general quite a mixed picture, but we have some first movers here in the line, say 6 months ahead, and they are ready for the implementation. Others say like less than 12 months, and only 14% expect more than 2 years, which is quite a great symbol looking for the future. The last question is, how would you rate the positive impact on plug and charge? So the question is, how would you rate the positive impact on the user journey through plug and charge? No impact, low impact, medium, high, or very high impact. I have one feeling regarding the answers, but let's before we start in the Q&A session, really interested in your feelings and your impact thoughts. Okay, so wow, this is really high and very high. So we have most of the participants today are believers. So great that you rate this impact that positive. And I think it's especially for the panelists quite important to have this, let's say, impact and your ideas, your priority in behind. All right. So then I would like to use especially your questions for our upcoming Q&A session. So we have one question already from our chat, which is to Sebastian Lahmann. So Sebastian, we spoke a little bit about the user journey, and it was definitely the view on the private users and the fleet user of electric cars. But one of the, let's say, most important topics these days is the topic of heavy-duty electric vehicles. And Sebastian Lahmann, question to you: could you a data point developed to show the size or the high requirements of the associated parking spaces? What's your view on heavy-duty electric cars? And do you see, let's say, the possibilities for more specifications in this field?
Yeah, at the moment we have a strong focus on, everybody can hear me, am I right? Yeah, I hope so. At the moment we have a strong focus on passenger cars and also on light electric commercial vehicles like the Sprinter Klasse. And so we have no particular point of view regarding heavy duty vehicles, but it's totally clear that we have to deal with those questions, and the simple answer is they had to fit in, and that's the point. But how it will be organized and how the layout will be, and what is the best opportunity to charge heavy duty vehicles, yeah, for me at the moment it's unclear.
Okay, so thank you, Sebastian. Our next question belongs to Susanne, because we spoke about the plug and charge functionality for the certificates for private users, of course. And the question we got here is, what are your thoughts on bringing energy suppliers into the mix to allow commercial drivers to pay the same or similar price that they pay at their businesses? So the question is definitely one of the most important. Do you have variety certificates in the car beside your private certificate, for instance? And the question is, do you have an answer on this expected prices there for private or business used car?
Okay, two parts to that. Does plug and charge make it possible that also an energy provider can make out the tariff that is used at a charging station? Yes, I think that's the big thing about, I mean, it was complicated and complex to really roll it out and to get it working. But of course, plug and charge makes it possible that all kinds of energy contracts can be used. Mm-hmm. The commercial part, I think the very short answer I can give is that I'm the tech person at Ionity and not that much responsible for commercial aspects. But I would like to point in, as someone who has also thought about this already, two things. One is we have very different energy pricing systems in the different countries. So it would be very difficult also from the regulatory aspect to have in France an energy price based on a German contract. As one thing. And then the other thing is high-powered DC charging stations, or essentially all DC charging stations, are a lot of investment, much more invest in terms of hardware that is needed if I simply have an AC electricity connection for a company. And for some, we need to find a way to have pricing schemes that also allow this investment to be refinanced, because otherwise there's no incentive anymore to put up charging stations. But that's as much as I can say on that topic.
All right, thank you. Thanks for pointing to two parts of the question out. I think the first one was even more important between the, let's say, challenge between the industries, and thanks for answering that as well. Next question to Jens. So I think it's a request of a, let's say, private session, because here's someone asking if or what are the requirements in terms of the hardware to develop EVSE site in order to design EVSE compatible to plug and charge technology. So what's, let's say, relevant for the controller, for the charging controller and the EVSE. So could you summarize it in just a few, or let's say 3 sentences?
Yeah. So there's good news. If you have implemented CCS basic compliant or compatible charging station, then it is very likely that the hardware is also capable of supporting plug and charge, because especially on the EVSE side, there is no special hardware requirements on the EVSE other than the ones that are already available or the baseline for CCS basic. So of course you have to implement the EV interface based on a PLC communication module, and of course you have to implement some sort of CPA backend interface with in this case some link that is depending on your network topology inside your topology with the CPO EVSE CPO link. So from my understanding, there is no relevant or dedicated hardware requirement connected to PNC on the EVSE side. On the EV side, it might be slightly different due to the fact that you have to store certificates on the ECU, but on the EVSE side, this is normally can be handled with the existing hardware.
Mm-hmm. Jens, I read an article yesterday from Electrif. It was unfortunately only a German article, but it pointed out a little bit what's needed for the breakthrough to plug and charge. So the question there was also what has to be considered on the EV side control units for plug and charge. So out of that article and the question here, I saw that on the EV side there is a little bit more to do. So the Taycan is on car got it already, did it already, but do you see other, let's say, also short hints for the EV side?
Yeah, of course, on the EV side, the point on the EV side is normally that those systems are highly resource constrained. So these are the processing performance as well as the storage capacity is very limited and reduced to an absolute limit to what is needed by the application. And in this regard, I think we see quite some requirements on the EV side, both in terms of storage for the certificates that need to be deployed on the EV side, as well as on the processing side for signing, for validating. These are processes that need to be performed and processed on the EV side, and for that, of course, you need to maintain a corresponding environment in terms of hardware that needs to be considered on the EV for the EV implementation.
Okay, thank you. Before we start or follow up in that deep dive technology questions, I have one other question to Sebastian Lahmann. So because we read the other day that the politics, especially in Germany, consider more the topic of, let's say, uniform payment at charging stations. So there is definitely political pressure out of that. And I think this could belong to Plug and Charge in the future. But can you figure out or point out a little bit more, why is there that much political pressure or political importance on this uniform payment topic?
Yeah, I try to. The question is, why not? Why not to simplify ad hoc payment? So it's always to look at ad hoc payment, because if you compare it to a payment process in the grocery store, it's very likely in these days that you pay by phone using your credit card, which by using Apple or Google Pay, and yeah, I think that's the main point, that many people talk about the payment process, and there's lots of messages in the media, and the picture is overall that ad hoc payment is sort of, or seems to be very difficult. And regarding payment with EMP contracts, you need thousands of cards. We all know it is sufficient if you have, I don't know, 2 or 3 EMP contracts. But the message for all people which are not affected directly from the electric mobility, that they have to get the feeling that they can afford and that they can handle charging an electric vehicle. And so one message must be clear, that there is a uniform payment process, and the payment devices you can use is a credit card or a debit card. I think that's the main point.
So this question more in the direction to Ionity, Susanne. So you spent so much effort and of course financial resources on the implementation of Plug and Charge. So is this topic Sebastian mentioned earlier, so like let's say a better ad hoc payment solution, is that then still the development of that is still on the roadmap of Ionity, or do you fully concentrate on the next level, let's say, make it way easier through Plug and Charge? So how do you see this, let's say, current authentication methods which are out in the markets at all of your stations?
Of course, we look at payment methods, and with Plug and Charge, we address one particular need, that is also in particular the need of the customer who wants to choose once, who wants to have everything ready and then just drive and not have to worry anymore. Other customers want to have more flexibility, want to be able to decide. And of course, when you build a European network, you have a high likelihood of having customers that are in a particular need for ad hoc payment. So we are also looking at ad hoc payment. As a European charging network operator, we are faced with the challenge that when we start to integrate a payment system, a banking system like a credit card system into the charging station, we suddenly have to do this in 24 different versions, because that is very not fully standardized. And from a technical perspective, this is very challenging. At the same time, we also see that things like Google Pay and Apple Pay are emerging more in other countries than in Germany, but already in Germany, this is becoming more and more popular. So when we talk about such a huge change and huge hardware change, we are also looking at the question, is it not possible to simply use the smartphone and the payment via Google Pay or Apple Pay instead of upgrading the hardware, which is a significant invest, and also an invest that in the end has to be financed. So the question is it really in the interest of the customer to upgrade hardware, which has an impact at some point also on commercials, or to find solutions that work on smartphones and so on, to make ad hoc payment as easy as possible. Clearly, for us, making ad hoc payment as easy as possible is a focus.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for answering that. The last questions belong more to the question of the direction of Jens. So Jens, we have one really technical question asked: what would be the protection level needed, whether ASIL B or ASIL D? Do you have an answer on that?
Yeah, frankly, I think we would have to invite an OEM representative here to answer that question. So I know ISO 15118 does not require any of these. So this is not in scope of the ISO 15118 specification. But that is definitely something coming from the OEM landscape. So frankly, I cannot really answer that question precisely. It might be even depending on some regulatory aspects and maybe different in different regions. I'm not 100% sure on this one.
Okay, so maybe last try for another question. There is a standard called megawatt charging standard. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, it's currently under development in CharIN. Basically, CharIN is working on that topic quite a bit. Yeah.
Do you know if this is applicable for passenger car platforms also? That was
at least at the moment it is not in scope. No, but it is at the moment really focusing on the heavy duty vehicle side, and the passenger car is focused on the CCS type 2 interface at the moment, or type 1, depending on the region you are at. But of course, there's always, I would never say no here, but at least at the moment, and I think in the near future, this interface is really dedicated towards heavy-duty vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Then my last round of questions to all of you. So you pointed it out already, but make it clear as, let's say, a conclusion for today. So how many years are we ahead before especially the CPOs accept plug and charging all over the stations? So when is plug and charge granted, say this way, from your understandings, from your roadmaps and from your assumptions? Susanne, would you like to answer that last final question for today?
I think we have demonstrated that it is already possible to do plug and charge in parts of the Ionity network, and we're expecting to roll it out to the entire network next year. I think that we won't be the only ones, in particular in Europe. I think there will be others following up shortly. So I think in 2 to 3 years, at least for DC charging, plug and charge will become a standard. I'm very optimistic on this.
It sounds like that. So we talk about months. Sebastian.
Oh, for us, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. Sebastian, what's your assumption? How long are we before every CPO except plug and charge?
That's a really difficult question, but I can imagine that in the middle or end of 2022, we'll see more and more plug and charge charging processes, hopefully, in the end.
All right. Jens?
Yeah, I think I can only report from the testing side. So things have become a lot more busy on that end, so let's call it that way. So we see a trend towards more intense testing on plug and charge, both for the EV and EVSE interface, as well as on the EVSE to backend, so basically CPO interface. Tests are becoming more frequent, and we also see in various domains, for example, in the public transportation domain, we see plug and charge being set from the very beginning as a requirement in the tenders, which is also a good sign. So in the bus industry, plug and charge is more or less set from the very beginning, at least as I know of. And that's, I think, a good sign that we will see development speeding up. To say a point in time or define a point in time is really hard for me here, but I think the next 2 years will be very, very interesting in this area.
All right. So I think even for a startup, it's quite interesting, and looking forward to your activities with Risco. So that was my part for that. But before we start the session, Michael Keller might have an answer on the question, when is plug and charge granted in Europe or globally. So from my point of view, I would like to thank you for this session. I thank especially the panelists for your insights and for your really deep thoughts and information about it. I really appreciate it. And for all the participants today, I would like to thank you for joining us, joining our last CharIN Tuesday this year. And Michael, so up to you. What do you expect, and what's your roadmap with CharIN for 2021?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think we already got the answer here in this poll what we did. So I would like to summarize a bit. So 2/3 of the voted company participants here said it will be in the next 12 months. I think that's a clear message. It's right in front of us. So this functionality is coming. And also 3/4 see it has a high positive or very high positive impact on the customer churn. I think that's a clear statement that this will be successful in the market, because if it brings a positive effect for the customer, it will be accepted and it will be loved. Yeah, I think it's a very good perspective and vision what we see here. Yeah. And also what I did like to see today is this vision of automated guidance, let's say, to the best and most feasible charging point on the road. What Sebastian did show, with also easy payment and also very transparent process for the customer. And also, yes, thank you, Sebastian, and also thank you to Susanne for the good explanation of a quite complex system in the background, I have to say. I did dig quite deep into that, but I still don't think that I really totally through to understand and be able to explain everything. So it's good to have the really right expert also here. And also a great movie, which was made here together also with Porsche and CharIN. This really shows how easy it will be and how seamless it is then at the end for the customer. Yeah, and also thank you to Jens for explaining about the what is all needed to support this PKI infrastructure. And I see there are the companies really intense working on and support the test procedures. And in total, I have to say, for the customer journey, there are more and more functions to come. There are more and more solutions being designed and being integrated in the whole functionality of the car and of the charging of the whole user experience. This gives me a very good and positive impression of what's coming. And thank you all to you, and thank you, Sebastian, and thank you for supporting and showing your interest today.
All right. So yeah, Merry Christmas. Enjoy the last days of this year, and hope to see you next year again with CharIN Tuesday, and stay healthy.